In my speech today, I talk about quite a few brands like Starbucks and Dell, Best Buy, Intuit, TurboTax. And these are companies that are doing a great job at using social technologies to develop different types of relationships. But I also, in the book, point out Cisco. And I use them in a lot of chapters, not because they're necessarily best in class, but because they're right in the middle of this struggle, of this transformation of the organization, which I think is actually even more admirable, because open leadership is really hard. And when you're trying to transform an organization, especially one as big as Cisco, and involved in as many differences and constantly changing and growing, it is a huge leadership issue and something that they are struggling with every day. But I think they're making a tremendous amount of progress, not only in terms of using it internally, but also using it with their customers and developing the new relationships they need to put in place. I think silos inside organizations are one of the biggest barriers to companies being more effective, because somebody in marketing doesn't want to talk to somebody in sales or in customer service, and yet from the customer's point of view, it's all one company. And so why should I have to start over and over again explaining my problem to different organizations, and why do I feel like nobody truly understands me? It's because the company doesn't look at me as a single customer. So I think these social technologies allow people who do the real work inside an organization to find the other people who do the real work, and to be able to collaborate much quicker, much more seamlessly, and with little friction in a way that they couldn't do it before. Now that causes problems inside an organization, because if you're at the front lines here and you don't have to go up and down the silos anymore, it causes those people in those silos to say, well, what's my job? If I'm a middle manager or an executive in charge of the silo and they don't need me anymore, then maybe this is some turf that I have to protect. So the change is going to be really hard unless you can have the organizational fortitude and the development in place to anticipate what kind of stress the organizations have to go through. I get this question all the time around, where does social media live inside the organization? Should it be PR who owns it? Does marketing own it? Does customer service? All of the above. Because it's almost as if you're asking, well, who owns the customer? That's my customer, not yours. You don't have permission to talk to them. And for an organization to truly be customer-centric rather than department-centric, you have to get away from that. So the best practices I see in organizations are where it's actually coordinated. You think about what that relationship is going to look like, and you pass that relationship back and forth when you need it to move back and forth. Is it an influencer who the next day becomes a customer? Being able to identify who that person is and the context they are talking to you in is extremely important. So my advice to brands who are still trying to figure out how to dip their toe into social technologies is to think about the one thing that's really important to you to accomplish next year. Pick a really hard goal as an organization that you have to get done. And then think about how social technologies can help you achieve that goal. How can looking at relationships in a new and different way get you closer to that place with fewer expenses in an easier way? Because unless it's really important to you, it's going to be hard to take that first step. The inclination for organizations is to say, maybe I'll just stick it over here in the corner, and I don't have to deal with it then because it's hard. And I would say just the opposite. Go square to something that's important to you and your executives, because they can only think about maybe 3 or 5 things. And if it's not one of those 3 or 5 things, your social media efforts will not gain traction. I would say the same advice applies to brands who are very deeply engaged in social media. I find just the opposite happening. They're scattered in so many different areas that there's no consistency, there's no weight, there's no bearing in direction to those efforts. So if anything else, I would put into the planning process now for the next year, how are these things going to be accomplishing very key and important strategic goals? Because unless you have that relevance, you will not get the support, you will not get the funding, your social media efforts will just sort of linger and just really not move forward to the extent they could.